Okay, it's been a little while since we've done one of these. Let's see if I can remember how it goes. Hey everyone, it's me, Aaron, and welcome to another episode of the Post Geek Out Reaction, the show on this channel where I just have an open, honest discussion about the thing that I just watched and wait, no, that's not what this is. Okay, all joking aside, yes, this is Comic Class, the show in which we just geek out about comic books. And today's episode is going to be a little bit different because normally on this show I come in here and I talk about brand new comics that are coming out, I talk about whatever that week's big release is, or I talk about something that is in the news. Today it's kind of going to be the opposite of that. It's going to be a bit of a retrospective. However, it is still being inspired by something that is coming out today because on the day that this episode comes out, the final issue of G Willow Wilson's Miss Marvel is coming out. I almost said the final issue of Miss Marvel is coming out and I had to stop myself because that is a nightmare scenario that I don't want to live in. No, Miss Marvel is still going to continue and it's being handed over to Saladin Ahmed, and I'm actually very happy about that because he just recently took over the Miles Morales Spider-Man book, and we're only 2 issues into that, but oh my gosh, I am loving his take on Miles Morales. I've been reading that book like, oh, this is exactly kind of what I wanted from this series. It's fantastic so far. So yeah, I actually really trust him to take over Miss Marvel, and I will go into more details about why I think he is a great fit for that character in just a moment. But considering that today is G Willow Wilson's final issue on that, I think that we should all just take a look back at her run on Miss Marvel and look at the birth of this character and talk about what it really meant to the industry, but also I just want to talk about what it meant to me. This is going to be kind of a personal episode. This is going to be talking about my experience with that series, what I have felt about that series, what I saw in my comic book store when I was still working in that store, when that series was coming out. So yeah, today it's just going to be a little trip down memory lane. Now, the first thing that I need to say about Kamala Khan is that I don't really feel like I need to say anything about Kamala Khan. I think that if you are tuning into a regular comic book series here on YouTube, you have to know who Kamala Khan is at this point. You have to know about Miss Marvel, and that is because of the impact that she has had on this industry. I feel like now that we're in 2019, we can start looking back at this entire decade as a whole, and I feel like out of all the characters that were created within this decade, she's either the most influential or the second most influential. If she's not number one, then Miles Morales is probably number one. But yeah, it is incredible to me that she was created 5 years ago and she really has just put that much of a stamp on the industry. She is now one of those characters that when you think of Marvel Comics, you think of her. And it's not because it's like some kind of like a flash in the pan thing of like, oh, well, this is just hot. It's been around for 5 years. In the comic book industry, something that's just kind of hot doesn't really stick around for 5 years. Comic books tend to kind of burn out real quick within like 2 years. So yeah, she has definitely stuck around, and she isn't just in comics, she is now in cartoons, she's in video games, she has action figures, she's even in talks to now join the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which if the Captain Marvel movie goes well, then yeah, that is a no-duh. She obviously will become part of it. But it's incredible to me that a character who's created that in the grand scheme of things shortly ago has made that kind of an impact on this industry. And one thing that really blows my mind about all that is that, you know, Kamala Khan, her series has been going on for 5 years now. It was originally planned as a 6-issue arc. G Willow Wilson a while back came out on Twitter and said, yeah, let me kind of break down a little bit of how Marvel works. When they hired me to write Miss Marvel, they said it was going to be an ongoing series, but they told me, you got 6 issues. Plan out 6 issues. If it ain't selling by then we are going to have to cancel it. So she wrote 6 issues and thought, that's what it's going to be. That's all this is going to be. And think about that. Think about the fact that you get to create this character, and in the back of your mind, you're like, all right, man, we've only got 6 issues, but I'm going to do my best on this. And then it just takes off like that. And now there are Halloween costumes. There are kids running around trick-or-treating as Miss Marvel. And 5 years ago, you had no idea if this character was even going to take off the ground. That is truly a wonderful success story. And I stop and I just think about how every single time that I go to a convention, I just see so many people out there cosplaying as Miss Marvel because they love that character that much. But let's go ahead and get into why people love this character that much and why I love this character that much. I think one of the main reasons why so many people enjoy Ms. Marvel is because of the humor. I think that G Willow Wilson has shown off an incredible sense of comedic timing in that series. Like, that has been actually one of the funniest superhero books out there, but not funny in the way that like Deadpool is, where it's meant to be a farce. It's funny in the like, this is everyday life kind of humor, and that to me is what I connected with it the most. When I went into that first issue of Ms. Marvel, I had no idea who G Willow Wilson was, and this was a brand new character, so I had like no backstory on her. I really didn't know what to expect going into this title, and what I found immediately in that book was a sense of relatability. And that's really incredible that, you know, Kamala Khan, she's a 15-year-old Pakistani girl living in New Jersey. I'm a 30-year-old dude living in New York. Yeah, that seems like we come from completely different worlds, and yet G Willow Wilson was able to come in here and go, this is the stuff that every single person out there deals with every single day. This is something that when you were a teenager, you dealt with that. It doesn't matter what generation, what decade you grow up in, this is stuff that you dealt with. But also, this is stuff that people who are into the geek community deal with. That is one thing that she established early on with Kamala Khan. She's kind of like us. If you're reading comics, then you can probably relate to Kamala Khan because she's a big comic nut. And at no point reading the Ms. Marvel series did I ever once feel like they had to stretch for anything, which is ironic considering that stretching is her power. But I never once read any issue of Ms. Marvel and I saw her trying to be in touch with the kids, and it felt like that Steve Buscemi meme, and when she comes out, hello fellow kids. No, it never felt like that. It felt like, oh man, this feels like what it's like to be a teenager. And it feels like something that no matter what generation you grew up in, it's kind of what it was like when you were a teenager. These are the things that all of us can kind of connect to. But also when it comes to her relating to the geek community and her actually being a geek, yeah, it felt like that was coming from the heart. It felt like the writer of this book, G Willow Wilson, she related to all this on a first level basis. In fact, there was one storyline in which she was playing this MMORPG game, and this virus in the game became sentient and started like basically hunting down everyone's information, and Ms. Marvel had to find a way to fight this computer virus within the game, and she was calling on all of her friends. And G Willow Wilson came out here and said, I literally based every single character in there off of people I used to play D&D with. I thought, you can feel that personal connection in there. And that is what makes this book so great. It feels human. Ms. Marvel has always been one of the most human characters out there. Which I guess is another thing that's actually kind of ironic considering that Ms. Marvel is technically an inhuman. However, that's not the point. The point is that Ms. Marvel feels so human. And these days, so many brand new characters that get created, it feels like when they create them, the creator wants to come in here and go, I'm going to make this the biggest, baddest character that walked onto the scene and everybody's going to turn their head and look at them when they walk into the room because they're so big and massive and godly. Ms. Marvel does not feel like the biggest badass walking into the room when she walks in the room. Ms. Marvel feels like a human being walking in the room, and I find that so much more fascinating. I want to follow the stories of that person so much more than the giant, perfect, nearly cosmic, semi-phenomenal powers. I can't remember the line from Aladdin, you all know what it is. But yeah, I find human beings so much more fascinating, and one of the reasons why Kamala Khan feels like a person to me is because we've watched her struggle. Her becoming a superhero has not been easy, and even though she does learn, and if you read her books today, you see that yes, she is far more confident. She has learned, she has grown over the course of this 5 years. It still feels like she is continuing to learn, and it feels like every single step along her journey has led up to her learning what she has learned. It does not feel like we have that one storyline where she didn't know what she was doing, but now she knows what she's doing. No, it feels like every single day of her life she's figuring out a little bit more. It feels like the progression of this character was a slow burn. And again, in a day and age where I understand, man, comics, it's a slow medium, so you do kind of have to have someone go through a massive growth within the span of one issue or one storyline. I understand why we need that, but it's so much more refreshing to me and has such a bigger impact on me when I can look at a 5-year-long growth and go, oh, I see that progression. I see them becoming more confident. I see them learning more about themselves, but they still have so much more to learn about themselves. That's the kind of stuff that gets me attached to these characters. I've said this many times before, but I'm still sticking by it. I really feel like Ms. Marvel is this generation's Spider-Man. And of course, Miles Morales, the actual this generation Spider-Man. But I feel like the two of them are, to this generation, what Spider-Man was to people growing up in the 60s and 70s. Because what made Spider-Man so unique back then was that nobody was really talking to kids in that generation. If you were a kid in a comic book back in the 60s, then you were the G Willikers Batman type of character. You were the sidekick. You were the person who was just there to basically support the main hero. You were the person who was supposed to stand over to the side while the adults had their conversation. And Spider-Man was a book that came out and it looked at all the kids out there and said, we know you're going through some stuff. We know your life is complicated. We know what it's like to not be perfect. We know what it's like to, be human. And that's what Spider-Man was for that entire generation. And since then, we have had so many characters who try to feel human, who try to feel like real people and try to address the stuff that real people are going through. And I feel like Ms. Marvel, and of course also Miles Morales, have to include him in there as well. I feel like the two of them, really for this generation, have been the best representation of that in comics. But another thing that has made G Willow Wilson's run on Ms. Marvel so special, other than the fact that it made Ms. Marvel such a likable character that was so relatable to everyone out there, it was also the fact that G Willow Wilson made such a rich world around Ms. Marvel. Jersey City feels real in there. Reading about Jersey City in there felt like when I was a kid living down in North Carolina and I was reading about New York in Spider-Man and in all the other Marvel books. It was like, I've never been there, but I really do kind of get a sense of what this place is like. And I actually know a lot of people who do live in Jersey and they love Ms. Marvel because, yeah man, it actually does kind of remind them of where they come from. She was actually able to capture that voice in that book. But when I say that G Willow Wilson created this whole world around Ms. Marvel, I don't just mean Jersey City. I don't just mean the actual physical world that she is living in. I also mean the supporting cast, which is something that I don't think gets nearly enough praise in G Willow Wilson's run on Ms. Marvel. Because so often supporting characters in comics, they'll be there to basically kind of like back up the hero. The hero just has someone to talk to, and then they're just kind of gone as soon as the next writer comes on board. You can feel that these characters are not just going to be gone when the next writer comes on board, because every single one of them feels like they are leading their own life. Every single one of them feels like they have their own storyline. You can make a comic just completely about them. Granted, it would be like an Image indie comic that's about being, just a regular person in a world full of superheroes, but I like indie Image books that are about that sort of stuff. I would read those books. But think about like Bruno. This guy who was just kind of there to be like, oh, I'm the friend, but I'm also a possible love interest. Man, he has so much going on for him. He has so many, like not even just one story arc. He has multiple story arcs across the course of this entire series. And I love that because it never makes you look at Bruno like, oh yeah, you're just kind of here to be the love interest. Like, no man, I kind of like Bruno, even if he was in no way connected to Ms. Marvel. There was a moment in which he went over to a school in Wakanda because he just could not be around the people in Jersey City anymore. And part of me was like, is he gonna start popping up in Black Panther? Because he's a really cool character. I'd be okay with him being in other books for a little bit, seeing his continued adventures somewhere else. Or think about Zoe. Zoe, when she first popped up, she was just the typical rich girl, popular girl at high school, making fun of Kamala Khan because she's different from her. And she has had so much growth, and so much heartbreaking growth in there too. Man, there was a moment in a recent issue in which Bruno, who had been gone because he was over in Wakanda, he comes back and he sees Zoe and he's just like, wait, what happened to you? Because in that small amount of time, she changed so much, but it was believable change because, again, G Willow Wilson can make these characters feel three-dimensional, can make them feel human. And all of us have our own lives. Nobody is a supporting character in someone else's story. We all have our own stuff going on. And that is absolutely the tone that G Willow Wilson's Ms. Marvel book had. Like, I absolutely love Kamala Khan's brother. He's one of my favorite characters in this entire book. And I had to stop and think, when was the last time I could look at a comic book character and even remember who their brother was? Like, I'm having to go down the mental Rolodex right now. Let's see. Okay. All right. Batman kind of sort of has a brother, I guess. That was kind of, he wasn't real. That was like an alternate reality thing. And then there was a crazy guy who thought it was his brother, so that doesn't really count. But, hold on. And so often when they do have an actual sibling who actually is important, it's because they themselves become a superhero. They themselves get superpowers. Her brother is so fascinating and so fun to follow, and he never puts on a cape. He never puts on a mask. There's even a moment when they give him superpowers in this series, and he's just like, no, I don't want any part of this. And he doesn't use them. Like, it never comes back up. I mean, it does come back up. That's actually a lie. It does come back up. But because other people bring it up, he himself still wants no part of this, and I love that. I love that he continues to stick by that, because yeah, that makes him different. That makes him a unique character. That makes him an interesting part of this world, and you can look at him and say, well, you're not just here to support Kamala Khan. I mean, you do support her because you're her brother, and the moments in which they actually have like some bonding time together are great in this book. Man, the family element in this book has been so good. I will get to that in just a second. But you can also just look at him and just go, yeah, but you're not going to be a superhero because that's not your thing. That's not what you do. Man, I really hope that in the final issue that comes out today, he doesn't just become a superhero, because then, man, will I have my foot in my mouth. But as I said, it's not just the supporting characters, it's the family element. When Kamala Khan has a sit down with her dad, and her dad is just there listening to her, man, you can feel the father-daughter love coming from that. When her mom learns that she is Miss Marvel, I will admit, I do wish that we got a little bit more of the interaction between her and her mom after that. I feel like they have been a little bit scarce, but the moments that we have gotten have been great. I love that. You feel the connection that the two of them have. And that has been how her entire family has been. Even like her extended family, when her brother ends up marrying someone else, their part of the family feels real. And it feels like they've added a whole new dynamic to this family, which is what happens in families. When you have a brother or sister or someone else in your family who marries into another family, that's exactly how it feels. But so far, I've been talking about my connection to Kamala Khan. I've been talking about what it feels like to not know what's coming next in your life, but you're still trying your hardest and you're still doing the best that you can. I think that that's kind of what Kamala Khan embodies, that stage of your life in which you're growing up and you're still trying to figure everything out. And I think that book captures that perfectly, and I think that every single person out there can relate to that. And also, as I said, I'm a big geek, obviously. And I think that anybody out there who is a big geek can also relate to Kamala Khan on that level as well, because as I said, that element of that character, it feels genuine. It feels like it's coming from the heart. However, there is an element to that character that another audience out there, aside from myself, they're going to feel a whole other level of connection to her. Because Kamala Khan, she is a Pakistani Muslim girl, which is a type of superhero that we almost see none of, especially leading their own books, getting their own action figures, being put into cartoons, being talked about, being put in movies. That is the type of hero that an entire audience out there who has wanted to see themselves being represented in comic books, they don't really get all that much. And this was a character that they finally had, and I have absolutely seen that audience appreciating that. I remember back when I was working in the comic book store, when her first appearance came out. It was in that Marvel Point 1 book. We saw a lot of people coming to the store and they were interested. They had all been talking about this character, but then there was one night in which two Muslim girls came in and they went over to the book and I have never in my entire time working in a comic book store seen two people that excited. They both picked up and went, this is it! This is the book that has it! She's right there on the cover! Like, these are literally the words that they were saying with that level of enthusiasm to each other. Like, they were kind of like whispering to themselves because like they wanted to contain their excitement. Like, you know that feeling when you're like really happy about something, but you don't want to disturb everyone around you, so it's like, I can't believe this is happening. Like that feeling, that's literally what they were doing right there. And I just looked at them and I went, I've been working in this store for years, and I continued to work in that store for years afterwards. And in that entire time, I never saw anybody that excited about a comic in my entire time working there. Like, just the sheer joy that was coming off of them was an amazing experience. That was always one of my favorite things about working in a comic store. It was just seeing people happy about comics. You know, whenever somebody came in and was like, I'm going to pick up my very first comic book ever and I'm very excited about it, I want your recommendation, that was always a great feeling. Whenever somebody came in on Wednesday like, this is the book that I've been waiting on, that was always fantastic. This was the biggest example of that I've ever seen. And then when the actual issue number 1 of that book came out, I continued to see that. I continued to see so many people coming in there, picking up that book, just incredibly excited for this character, and it didn't stop. Yeah, of course, whenever there was a story about a character in the news and everybody's talking about this character, a lot of people are going to rush issue number 1 and they're all not going to come back, but I saw a bunch of brand new audiences in my store coming back who had not been there before. I saw so many new readers getting into comics because of Ms. Marvel, and they didn't like just come in and read Ms. Marvel. That's what got them started. But then they spread out into like Squirrel Girl, they spread out into Captain Marvel, they spread out into a ton of Image books. I mean, heck, I think half the sales of Monstrous and Saga and Wicked and Divine should all just go over to G Willow Wilson, because I saw so many people who came in starting reading with Ms. Marvel eventually go on to those books as well. This got so many people in my store to start reading books, but it also really kind of taught me a lesson about how new audiences are getting into comic books these days. Because one of my jobs at the comic store was I did inventory. After a week was up, I would count how many copies of a book was up. And through doing that, I would learn how many people were reading a book, but I would also learn how many copies of the book we had ordered. And the sales of Ms. Marvel, you know, yeah, they like miniseries out there, they did start to decline. They eventually did kind of balance out there at a point. But, you know, when they balanced out in my store, I looked at it and went, okay, we're still selling a decent amount. We're still doing okay on the book, but it doesn't have, you know, the impact that it once did. But then I kept noticing so many people in my store coming in and buying the trades of it. They would just come in and buy like several trades in a row, or they would only come in for the most recent trade. They wouldn't come in for the single issues. I started hearing all these stories about how books like Ms. Marvel or several of the other younger reader Marvel books out there were now selling very well in trades, even if they weren't selling that great in single issues. And I thought, well, I guess I can kind of see that. But then there came one day in which, as I said, my job was to do inventory in the store. There came a day in which I had to go out to our warehouse to count all the trades that we were getting. Because when we get trades, they go to our warehouse first, they organize them there, then they ship them out to our store. So I had to go out there to help them with that. And that was the first time that I actually saw exactly how many trades we got. Because I always just looked at the new stuff we got. The back orders, the older stuff, the trades that we could keep reordering over and over and over again, I never counted that stuff. So I went out to the warehouse and I saw exactly how many Ms. Marvel trades we were getting. What we were getting was more than the Captain America, Iron Man, and Thor trades we were getting combined. Like, it was a massive stack. Like, I kept like looking at like the stacks we had for all the other characters and I was like, okay, so let me see what weird combinations I can come up with here in order to say what is selling more. If you took all the Blackest Night books out of the Green Lantern section, it would be selling more than Flash and Green Lantern combined. You could even throw Green Arrow in there and it was still beating that out. It was insane to me how many of these trades we got. And that really taught me this book is being aimed at new readers. It's a book being aimed at a younger audience. And hey man, I grew up with comics. I grew up with that idea that comics, they come out once a month, I read it for 15 minutes, and then I wait a whole other month on this. But younger audiences haven't grown up on this idea of having to wait an entire month for part 2. Younger audiences have grown up on this idea of, if I have to wait, then I want what I'm reading now to have some meat on it. I want what I'm reading now to be its own storyline. I want what I'm reading now to feel at least partly complete. And honestly, I can't blame them on that. Over the past couple months, I've switched over to only reading stuff in trades. It's so much nicer. It feels so much better to have a complete thing right there ready to go. I have had such a better time reading comics. They've had such a bigger impact on me ever since I switched over to just reading trades. So yeah, man, I think the kids have the right idea on this one. And Marvel absolutely realizes that, because after I went over to the warehouse and I saw how many trades we were getting, a story broke in which Ms. Marvel had sold 500,000 trades. That is mind-blowing, but it proves my point. The new readers out there, this is the format they like, and Ms. Marvel is aimed directly at them, and they're enjoying that. The younger audiences out there want these books in this format, and Ms. Marvel is perfect in that format. So as I said, on today's episode, I wanted to have a retrospective of G Willow Wilson's run on Ms. Marvel, but what we ended up doing was kind of just talking about Ms. Marvel in general. However, I think that is talking about G Willow Wilson's run on Ms. Marvel, because so many creators out there can come up with truly amazing new characters, but I don't think anyone other than G Willow Wilson could have created something quite like Ms. Marvel. They couldn't have created something this special and this unique that spoke to this many people and had this much humanity and this much heart in it and really stood out from so many other books out there. In fact, it was so unique and so closely tied to G Willow Wilson that, I kid you not, this is absolutely true. On the day that the news story broke that G Willow Wilson was going to be leaving the Ms. Marvel book, earlier that day, I actually thought to myself, gee, I wonder what would ever happen if G Willow Wilson left Ms. Marvel. I don't know why. I must have sensed it in the force. I remember I was in an elevator riding up to go to a movie theater. I don't even remember the movie I was going to see that day, but I was in an elevator and all of a sudden out of nowhere, I just had this thought, G Willow Wilson has been on that book for a while. I wonder how long she's going to be on, and if she leaves, I wonder, oh man, what would happen to that character? Because I can't imagine anybody else working on that book. Oh man, that would be crazy if someone else was working on that book. I literally had that thought, and then after I got out of the movie, I checked Twitter, and that was the #1 story going around on my entire Twitter feed, was how she was leaving Ms. Marvel. I must be just that closely connected to this character and to this series. That's how much I love it. I could sense something was happening. However, even if she is leaving that title, I really trust Solid Intimate on this book. Because, as I've said, her and Miles Morales are kind of this generation Spider-Man. He's doing a great job over on the Miles Morales book right now. So yeah, I can't wait to see what he ends up doing with the book. And one last time, a big salute to G Willow Wilson for creating something this special. But those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below or on Twitter and Twitch @Professor Authority. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Come back next time. Bye.